Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, we successfully complete our logout portion. So right now I have already complete our registration, logging and the logout. So here I want to define this type of one of the menu condition when this user will be logged in, then our this register and the locking button not should be visible. And when this user will be log out, then our this register and the logging will be visible. So that is the condition we have to set. So here we have to define some of the condition in our menu area. So that is the menu I have defined in our base HTML, right? So now go to our base HTML. So it's pretty much easy things, like here into the base HTML I have defined all that our menu. So now I want to actually take this our logout. After this logging I want to define this logout. Okay, that means that is actually our logout portion. So now here I want to define one of the condition. So I just simply define one of the if condition. So here with this percentage I define of the if condition. If our user, that means this user, and also they have the another function as a is authenticated. So with this we can actually defining it. So I just simply define as a is underscore authenticated td. So that is actually authenticated. So if this user is authenticated, that means if this user is logging, then I only want to display our home and the logout button. Okay, and else it should be display our register and the login. So now I want to define another else. So I just simply define that else, right? So else it should be display our this two of this function, and then here after this I have to finish it. That means I have to finish our and if condition. I just simply and our if condition. Okay friend, so that's all you have to do. Now let's check this out. Everything will be do by this our function, that means the is authenticated function. Now if you click as a save all, and now if you refresh it, yes, now you can see right now I am not logged in. So for the reasons our home and our logout is not visible. You can see right now I am not logging for the reasons, first of all it says checked it, and when this is checked it, this user is not logged in. By default they have else option. Our this register and the logging button is now visible. And when you logged in, then that means when this user is authenticated, and then our home button and the logout button will be visible. Now let's check this out. Here right now into logging I just put as a Kazi and then password and then click as a login. Yes, you can see friend, after that logging now it's showing our home and the logout. So if you click as a logout, and then you can see it's now showing as a register and the logging button. So now here I want to do when this user will be logged in. That means here if the user put appropriate username, and also if this put appropriate password, and if you click as a login. So here you can see it's now showing our home page. So into this home page I want to display appropriate this user all the details. That means this user, username, email, that is the all, and also the picture. Here I want to display it. Because of all, when we register it by the username, email, the password, and also the image and the Facebook ID, right? So now I want to actually display all that information in particular that area after this logging. So here also we have to define that things by a specific user ID data, right? Because when you logging with the Kazi, then it should be display all that Kazi details. That means Kazi ID details will be visible. When you logging with the Aryan, then it should be display all that Aryan related all the data. So how we can do that work? For doing this we have to work in our index. Because of all, that is our index function. So now go to our view, and into the view area, that is our index function. So that is our index function, right? So into the index function area we have to work. So here we have to define that all the things on here. Like here I have to first of all define the if condition, and then our request, and into this request our user. First of all, it should be display our authenticated user. So if you want to find out that authenticated user, I have already discussed about that things with you. That have another function as a is authenticated. And now I also want to define our this requested user details. That means here I take one of the variable as a current. Okay, current, and then user, and then this request, and that means this requested user. So this is requested user I want to get all the data, user, I want to get all the data. Like here if you want to check it, I want to check it first, then it will be better. I want to print it. I want to print our this current user. That means here I take the things with this variable, that requested user. So I just simply defining it. This current user, I want to access that username, and also I want to print our this current, okay, this current user email. So that's all that our database field actually, right? And now also if you want to check that ID, that means this current, which user is already authenticated in particular that position, with this current user ID, if you want to also get, you can also get it. So I just simply define as a print and then the current user ID. That means our database table field name as the ID. So I just simply define as the ID on here. Okay, so now I want to check it. Like if you now click as a save all, that the things will be displayed on here. Okay, everything is now running well. Now I just refresh this page. So now we should be getting all that this user data. So right now I am already logged in. So now if you open it, now you can see it's now perfectly displayed as a Kazi, and it's perfectly print our kazi@gmail.com. So here I define as a username, email, and the ID, and this Kazi ID actually the two. So now I want to get all the data with a specific this ID. That means this user data, I want to get the things with a specific this ID. So if you want to get it, so right now I don't need this. I just simply remove two of this because here I want to get this data with a specific this user ID, right? So now I want to take one of the variable as a user underscore basic info, whatever you want. So right now I'm using as a info, and then what exactly you have to do with our user model. So we have to also import this user model. So with this user model, I want to define our objects. Okay, with these objects I want to get this data. That means our primary key, I have defined that things with our current user ID. So for now I want to take that things with one of the variable. Okay, so here we don't need this print it because I have already checked it. So here I take this data, that means a specific this user data, and take the things with one of the variable as a user underscore ID. So I just take this our specific current user ID data and take the things with this variable. So into the primary key area we have to pass it, right friend? I hope it's very much clear to you, and the rest of this will be the same. And then also here I'm using that our user, so we have to also include it. That means we have to import it. Okay, so here I define as a form and the Django and the contrib auth and the models. Okay, and then I want to import our user, so I just simply define that user. Perfect. So here I want to display our user details. So here I have already defined our user. So with this user we will get all that our user email address and the username, and also I want to display our Facebook ID, that means the Facebook URL, and also I have defined another one as a profile picture. So if you go to our models, into the models I have defined all the things. You can see I have defined that Facebook ID and the profile picture with this model, that means our user info model. So we have to also import it. We have to also import it in our view area, that means here. Okay, better after this I want to use it as a form. So that is in our application, in our logging application, and with the logging application that is our models, right? So now I just simply define as a logging, that means in our logging app, and then here there is a models. So into this models I want to import, so into this from to this model I want to import what? I want to import our this model, that means model class as a user info. So we have to use it. So I have already get all that our email address and the our username with this user, and now also we have to get all the data from our user info. So here that is our basic. So from here I have already getted our user details, that means the username and then our email address. So now I want to take another variable as a user more underscore info, and from this I want to use our model. Our model is the user info, right? So that is I have already input this our user info, and into this user info area from here I want to define as objects. So with this objects I want to get our this primary key. So if you want to display this primary key, here you have to define our this model, and into this model area you can say I have also defined as a on click. So here I have already created one of the relation, that is a one-to-one relation. So if you want to display any kinds of one-to-one relation primary key, then you have to define that things with our, first of all, that is user. Because of all, here I take the things with this user, right? So with this user, and then you have to define double underline and then the primary key. Okay, so now our primary key, I have defined our primary key, that means the current user primary key. I take the things with this user ID, so I just simply pass it on here. Okay friends, so now we successfully get all the data from our table. That means with this user model we get our email address and also this username, and with this that means from our user info model we get our two of this data as a Facebook URL and also the profile picture. And also here I define with the specific primary key, that means user ID, and that means this current user ID details, right? So we get all the data. So now I want to visible it. So I want to visible it in our index. That means that is actually our index.html. So now go to our template, into the template, that is our index.html. So if you want to access this, all the data we have to pass it, right? So here we have to pass it. So after this I take as a dictionary, as a dist, and then we have to pass all that our details data. So from here we have to pass our user basic info. So I just simply pass it as a basic info, and also after this we have to pass our another field data, that means our user more info data, right friend? I think everything should be very much clear to you because I have explained everything. So now also we have to pass our this one. So here we have to pass it, right? So now I have already passed everything in our that is our user details data, and also I pass our that is our user all that Facebook URL and the profile picture. And also now we have to pass our this dictionary into the context area. So I have already passed it. Perfect. So now we can actually access all that our details data, that means user basic info data and user more info data in our index.html. So now I want to display it in our index.html. Go to here. So here we have to display it. So friend, better I want to continue this process, and in our next video I will complete our total part. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.